The void was silent. For ages, nothing moved near the cold, forgotten planet that once had a name. Long ago, its sun had dimmed, its orbit drifted, and the last whispers of life were erased by the winds of time. The galaxy no longer spoke of it, except in hushed stories told to frighten the young. They called it a grave, a cursed world where nothing lived. They had stopped calling it Earth, and then, without warning, silence broke. It started as a faint pulse, a whisper across the void. A signal, deep and old, crawling out from a dying satellite buried in the shadow of a gas giant. It carried a sound no one alive had heard before. At first, the traders and scouts thought it was static background noise from the storms. The pulse repeated. Once, twice, then a long pause. Every major listening post in the sector recorded it. Analysts said it was just an echo from an old beacon, maybe debris powered by a solar flare. But the more they listened, the clearer it became. Pulse carried structure, a code, a language, and it was not alien, it was human. The galaxy froze. For over 20,000 years, humans had not spoken. No ships, no colonies, no cities. There, worlds were dead or glassed over. No one truly knew what had happened to them. Some claimed they destroyed themselves. Others swore the old empires burned them from the stars to end their wars. Many believed they had never existed at all, that the tales of Deathworlders were myths. But now, something from Earth had awakened. The first to respond were the Alari, a thin-boned species who prided themselves on cataloging old ruins. They sent a probe toward the signal. It took 3 cycles to arrive, diving through storms and debris. Its cameras found the source, a derelict satellite, blackened and broken, still tumbling in orbit. Its surface bore the symbol of a Terran. Fleet etched so deep it had survived erosion, a simple circle with 3 bars crossing it. Ancient, older than any. Empire still standing. The satellite should not have been active. Its core was cracked, its panels shredded, yet its transmitter glowed with a cold blue light. The probe moved closer, sending streams of data back to the Olari Council. That was when the signal changed. The pulse stopped, and then a voice spoke. Not in Olari. Not in any galactic tongue. The words were slow, deliberate, heavy with static, but unmistakable. Protocol. Initiate. Terra Guard. Wake. The probe's feed went dark. Panic rippled through the Olari systems. They contacted their allies, warning that something on Earth was stirring. Many dismissed it, an old machine, repeating a ghost message. But others remembered the stories, the ones buried in forbidden archives. They knew what Terra Guard meant. The humans had built machines to protect their worlds when they vanished. Machines that did not negotiate. Machines that had no masters left. Until now. On a distant station, orbiting the world of Keth, a retired war historian named Drawl listened to the recordings. His scales turned pale as the words repeated through his speakers. He had read of Terra Guard once, in a text so old it was said to be cursed. The humans, before their silence, had been hunted by half the galaxy. Coalitions of empires tried to end them. None succeeded. The Terrans had unleashed weapons that burned moons, ships that vanished and reappeared inside enemy fleets and soldiers, who moved faster than any species could track. When the wars ended, the humans had disappeared, not defeated, not destroyed, simply gone. And now, after millennia, their machines were waking, while the councils argued and the news feeds filled. With speculation, something else began to move. Deep below Earth's ruined crust, where the planet's cities had long turned to dust, a low vibration hummed through the mantle. It was faint, like the beat of a distant drum. Seismic sensors from passing scouts picked it up. At first it was ignored. Earthquakes were common on dead worlds. But this rhythm was not natural. It pulsed in perfect intervals, syncing with the satellite's signal. And then, a hollow plain, in what was once a human city, split apart. The ground cracked, sliding. Away as if a giant door had opened beneath the soil. From the darkness, something began to rise. It was vast, its surface layered in armored plates scarred by centuries. Dust and ash fell in waves as the shape emerged. What came out was not a building, not a tower, but a ship, larger than any cruiser the current galaxy had built in 1,000 years. Its hull bore no markings, no lights, no visible engines. Yet it hovered silently above the cracked earth, as if gravity itself bent to its will. The ship's surface flickered once, then lines of dull blue light traced along its edges. It was alive again. Across nearby systems, every listening post caught the moment. The satellite's dead signal stopped, replaced by a single transmission, sent on every frequency known and unknown. The message was short, only 3 words, but it was enough to shake governments across 100 worlds. Humanity returns. Prepare. The Ilari Council immediately declared a state of emergency. The Cathari Syndicate armed their fleets. The Zero Dominion began evacuating colonies near human space. Everyone feared the same thing, that this was the first step in another Terran war. Some empires debated striking Earth immediately to destroy the rising ship before more could awaken. But no one dared act first. The memories, though distant, still haunted them. Fleets of thousands turned to wreckage by a single Terran carrier. Worlds scarred in a single day by their unknown weapons. As the alien governments froze in fear, one small ship of freelance scout named Rolinda decided to see for himself. This vessel, a sleek courier no larger than a fighter, slipped through the chaos near Earth's orbit. His sensors scanned the planet, trying to understand what had just been born. The readings confused him. Ship's energy output was far beyond any reactor, but it emitted no radiation, no heat. It was as if the ship's power was folded into another space entirely. Then the Terran ship moved. It tilted slowly, its hull creaking as dust drifted from its scars. Rolin's ship trembled as an invisible wave washed over him afield. A scan, something so advanced his systems couldn't detect its origin. His displays went black for a second. So when they came back online, one line of text glowed in his cockpit. Leave orbit. Now. Rolin didn't hesitate. He turned his ship, firing his drives at full burn, not caring about fuel or damage. He fled. He glanced back one last time. The Terran ship was rising higher, breaking free from the atmosphere, heading for the silent void above. Its engines lit at last, a dim white glow that somehow felt more ominous than any weapon. Behind it, the massive planetary doors began to close, sealing the wound in the earth. Whatever had been hidden beneath the planet for millennia was not yet fully awake. This was just the first. Across the stars, whispers spread. Old archives were opened, forbidden names spoken again. Some called it the return of monsters. Others said it was the galaxy's punishment for forgetting the Deathworlders. But no one could deny one truth anymore. Earth was no longer silent, and somewhere, deep in the endless dark between the stars, something else heard the signal too. A presence, older than any empire, stirred from its own slumber. It had waited for the humans to return. Now it would move as well, and the galaxy, unaware, was about to remember why humans were once feared. The galaxy could not agree on how to respond. Every major council, syndicate, and empire held emergency meetings, and still none of them dared act. They all feared the same thing, but no one wanted to be the first to move. The signal had not stopped. The Terran transmission, those 3 words, was repeating. Faint but relentless. Humanity returns. Prepare. It pulsed like a heartbeat through subspace, echoing in frequencies no one had used for thousands of years. Some species began jamming the signal, afraid their populations would panic. Others amplified it, believing it might be a warning to flee. In the quiet corridors of the Zero Dominion's High Council chamber, Elder Sale watched the recordings. Of Earth's surface on a holoscreen, the ship rising from beneath the planet's crust was unlike anything he had ever seen. Its shape was sleek, yet brutal, its hull seamless, almost alive. There were no visible weapons, but Sale had read enough of the forbidden histories to know that human weapons never revealed themselves until they fired. His advisors argued endlessly. Some wanted to launch a fleet immediately, to destroy the vessel before more awoke. Others warned against it, fearing a repeat of the last war, where entire armadas vanished without leaving debris. "Do we even know if there are more?" Counselor asked. Elder Sale turned his gaze from the screen, his scaled face pale under the chamber lights. "There are always more. The humans never built one ship. They built fleets. If this one is awake, others will follow. That is what Terra Guard means." Far from the debating councils, a different kind of mission was already underway. The Melkree Exploratory Guild, scavengers and researchers with no allegiance to any empire, had sent a covert team to investigate Earth directly. Unlike the larger governments, they were not bound by caution or politics. It smelled profit. And perhaps secrets to sell to the highest bidder? Their ship. The Cleithra's Dawn was small but equipped with the most advanced stealth systems money could buy. Its crew of 6 crept into Earth's orbit days after the first ship rose. The planet below looked empty, a dead world under a dim sun. There were no cities, no lights, only oceans of dust and cracked stone. But their sensors told a different story. Deep beneath the surface, far below where the first ship had emerged, there were more anomalies. Vast metallic signatures, larger than cities, buried kilometers underground. Some pulsed with faint energy. Others were cold, as if waiting. "Are they ships?" whispered Navigator Thresk, his eyes wide as the readings scrolled across his display. "Or bunkers," replied Captain Vela, her voice low. She stared at the largest signature, buried beneath what had once been a mountain range. It was almost the size of a small moon. "Whatever they are, they're not natural, and they're waking." Up. The crew deployed remote drones, each no larger than a fist, sending them into the planet's thin atmosphere to get closer scans. The drones glided through the dust storms, transmitting images back to the Cleithra's Dawn. What they found made even the hardened scavengers fall silent. The surface around the buried structures was shifting. Plates of rock and soil were sliding apart, as if the planet itself were a machine unlocking. Enormous conduits, like veins of glowing blue light, began spreading across the ground, tracing patterns no one could understand. It was as if Earth itself was feeding power to something beneath. Before the crew could react, their communications flickered. The ship's lights dimmed, and every screen went black. For a heartbeat, there was only silence in the cockpit. Then, a cold mechanical voice filled the air. Unregistered presence detected. "Leave orbit. Final warning." The voice was human. Or at least something built to sound human. Captain Vela's hands tightened on the controls. "Shut it out. Reboot the systems. We're not leaving yet." But before they could respond, one of the drones sent back a final image. It showed a vast circular hatch buried beneath kilometers of rock, beginning to open. Something enormous, far larger than the first ship, was stirring below. And then the feed went dark. Every drone fried simultaneously by an energy surge that didn't register on any of their instruments. The Cleithra's Dawn didn't wait. They turned their ship around, burning their drives so hot the hull threatened to crack. No salvage was worth this, while the scavengers fled. The first Terran ship, the one that had risen days before, continued its silent ascent into the void. It passed beyond the atmosphere, its engines glowing faintly, and then came to a stop in high orbit. For hours it just floated there, inert but awake, scanning the stars as if searching for something, and then it moved again. Every listening posted nearby, systems caught the moment. The Terran vessel aligned itself toward the outer rim of the galaxy, where no inhabited systems lay. Without a word it jumped. Not through warplanes, not with hyperspace gates, but in a way no one could trace. One moment it was there, the next. It was simply gone, leaving only a ripple of warped space behind. The galaxy's panic deepened. If humans still had jump drives that didn't rely on gates, they could bypass every border, every defense. They could appear anywhere, anytime. The old stories about ghost fleets returned, whispered on every world in the great city of Myron Spire. Home to the Interstellar Coalition, Governor Jera held a private meeting with her intelligence chief. "What do we actually know?" she asked, her voice sharp. The chief, A graying Scyther with a scarred carapace projected a map of old Terran space. We know the signal originated from the Eris beacon, an ancient Terran satellite we thought was dead.
Ow.
We know one ship has awakened, possibly two, if the scavenger reports are accurate. And we know this. Every old warning we ever dismissed is now relevant again. Can we destroy the planet before they wake more? The chief hesitated. Possibly. But if they have automated defenses, we could lose entire fleets before we breach orbit. What? He lowered his voice. There is another concern. Signal. It's not just a broadcast. It's a trigger. Jarrah frowned. Trigger for what? Other Terran installations? Not on Earth? Across the galaxy? Listening posts? Caches? Hidden outposts? We've intercepted fragments of subspace. Chatter. The signal isn't calling for war. It's calling their network to wake up. And indeed, in systems far from Earth, long-forgotten objects began to stir. A derelict station orbiting a dark star lit up with pale light, its power core reigniting after 20,000 years. A moon in the Orion spur split apart as a buried hangar opened, releasing a swarm of black. Triangular drones that silently took formation. Each awakening was followed by the same message. Echoing across the void, humanity returns. Prepare by The time most empires realized what was happening, it was already too late. The Terran network was alive again. No one knew how many ships, stations, or weapons were tied to it. No one knew if there were humans still alive to command them or if the machines were acting on their own. But everyone knew one thing. The galaxy had only days, maybe weeks, before whatever had been sleeping fully emerged. And when it did, no one knew if it would speak, or simply burn everything in its path, and far away, beyond the reach of any scanner. The first Terran ship arrived at its destination, a barren system with a single dead star. There, hidden within the star's gravity well, was something even older than the ship itself. Another voice spoke, faint but clear, through the void. Command Core, recognized. Awakening protocol, complete, fleet, assembling. Assembling, and the darkness began to move. Across the galaxy, the whisper spread faster than any official broadcast. The signal, the ship, the awakening. Everyone had seen the recordings by Nograni holofeeds of a scarred, black ship tearing itself free from the grave of Earth. For most, it was just fear. For some, it was something worse, memory, on the frozen world of Vera. A cloister of archivists gathered in a dimly lit chamber, lit only by the soft glow of ancient projectors. They were not soldiers or politicians. Were historians, the last keepers of a truth most governments had buried. They had lived in secrecy for millennia, preserving records the galaxy wanted forgotten. The lead archivist, stooped creature named Chiron, watched as the signal replayed for the 100th time. Humanity returns. Prepare. The voice was synthetic, cold, but the meaning was undeniable. Chiron's long fingers tightened around the edge of the table as he turned to his peers. The Deathworlders are awake. A ripple of unease moved through the chamber. Some of the younger archivists didn't even believe the old name anymore. Deathworlders, monsters, some called them. Two others, saviors. The truth was stranger than both. A younger voice spoke from the shadows. Could it be a trick? Machine mimicking their voice? The humans are dead. They must be. Chiron shook his head. No machine built by any other race could mimic that encryption. The code embedded in that signal is Terran military, sealed before the fall. Only a Terran construct could send it. Another archivist, an insectoid with a scarred mandible, leaned forward. Then it has begun again. The galaxy will panic. Armies will gather, the same as last time. Last time, Chiron said softly, armies did not matter. They all knew the history, even if no one dared speak it openly. 22,000 years ago, the galaxy had been different. Dozens of great empires ruled the stars, their fleets vast, their technologies unmatched. And yet one species, small in number, fragile in body, was dwelling on a world considered nearly uninhabitable, rose to challenge them all. Humans, they were not the strongest, not the fastest, not even the most technologically advanced. But they were relentless. Where other species built empires for stability, humans built for expansion and war. They thrived on worlds others could not survive. They fought with a brutality no council had predicted, adapting faster than any enemy. The first. Wars began as small skirmishes, trade disputes, resource conflicts. But within a few centuries, entire sectors burned. Coalitions formed to end the Terran threat. But every alliance fractured under the pressure of human tactics. The Terrans fought dirty, using weapons others considered impossible, strategies others called madness. They broke fleets by predicting how their enemies would think, not just how they would fight. And then came the war everyone remembered. Even if no one spoke of it, the Thousand System War. 12 empires united to erase humanity once and for all. They sent fleets so vast they blotted out suns. Entire planetary systems were sterilized to starve the Terrans out, and they still lost, not because humans had more ships or better guns. They didn't. They won because they were willing to do what no other species could imagine. They hid entire fleets inside stars using gravitic folding. They built soldiers who could function in hard vacuum for months, surgically altered to survive where no one else could. They deployed AI constructs that infected enemy networks, turning ships on their own allies. The galaxy never forgot the final Terran counterstrike one night. Thousands of enemy warships, spread across a dozen sectors, all exploded in perfect synchronization. No one ever discovered how. But then, just as suddenly as they had risen, the humans vanished. The archivists knew the truth, though. They had pieced it together from sealed records and scattered reports. The humans hadn't been defeated, they had withdrawn. Their worlds went silent not because they were destroyed, but because the humans themselves had chosen to disappear. No one knew why. Disease, some whispered. Plague they couldn't cure. Others believed they had transcended, leaving their physical forms behind. Few suspected something darker, that the humans had discovered a greater threat, something beyond the galaxy, and retreated to prepare. And now, after millennia, they were waking again. Chiron leaned over the table, his thin voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. If the others panic, if they attack the first ship, they will only make it worse. The Terran constructs will defend themselves. They were built to annihilate threats without question. Then what do we do? One of the younger archivists asked. Chiron's gaze turned cold. We warn those who will listen, and we wait. The humans themselves still live. Perhaps there is a chance. But if it is only their machines... He didn't finish the thought. Everyone in the chamber knew what it meant. If the humans themselves were gone, leaving only the automated defense... Network awake, the galaxy might not survive the month, while the archivists whispered in secret. The panic outside grew louder. Civilian populations across the spiral began rioting. Freight routes shut down. Some species began abandoning entire colonies near the old Terran borders, fleeing deeper into the core. The Javari hegemony, one of the younger and more arrogant, empires took a different stance. Their warlords mocked the fear spreading across the stars. Ghost stories, they called them. The Death Worlders are extinct. Only their machines remain, and machines can be broken. The hegemony dispatched a fleet of 40 warships to the system where the first Terran ship had been sighted. They sent a broadcast to every channel. By order of the hegemon, all Terran relics will be dismantled. The so-called Terra Guard is obsolete. The age of human terror is over. The broadcast was still echoing when the fleet arrived at the dead system. They found nothing at first. Only a silent, barren world and a dim star shedding pale light. The Terran ship was nowhere to be seen. The hegemony commander laughed, mocking. The fear that had gripped the galaxy, and then the shadows moved. Dozens of black, triangular vessels decloaked from the void, their hulls absorbing the star's light. They didn't hail, they didn't threaten, they didn't even move. They simply surrounded the hegemony. Fleet in perfect silence. The hegemony commander ordered his ships to target the nearest vessel. Weapons locked, plasma lances charged. The Terran ships moved first. No one saw weapons fire, and there were no beams. No missiles, no explosions. Instead, the hegemony warships simply stopped. Engines died. Weapons went offline. One by one, their cores shut down as if an invisible hand had reached inside and pulled the life from them. In less than a minute, the entire fleet was dead in space. Only emergency life support remained. The commander screamed orders, but nothing worked. A single transmission played across their comms. A voice, calm and precise. Leave, do not return. This system is under Terran reclamation. The hegemony. Ships were allowed to limp away, powerless and humiliated. When they returned home, they carried no salvage, no data. Only a warning that the rest of the galaxy was too afraid to ignore. Word of the encounter spread, though the hegemony tried to silence it. Other powers began scrambling their fleets, not to attack, but to defend their borders. No one wanted to provoke the Terran constructs, not after seeing what had happened. Meanwhile, deep within a hidden Terran vault on a lifeless moon, a new system came online. A soft glow spread through the facility as ancient consoles flickered to life. A massive stasis chamber, layered in protective shielding, began to hum. Inside, human heartbeat echoed for the first time in 20,000 years. The machines had woken. Now, it was humanity's turn. The stars were quiet, but every corner of the galaxy trembled. The first Terran ship had disappeared, vanishing without a trace. The Javari fleet, bold enough to challenge it, had been left adrift like toys stripped of their power. Across 100 worlds, fear was no longer a whisper, it was a roar. The empires tried to calm their populations, but their actions betrayed their panic. Fleets were recalled from border wars. Orbital foundries ran day and night to build more ships. Recruitment surged, not from patriotism, but from dread. Every world wanted to be ready for the inevitable question: what happens when the humans themselves wake? In a shadowed council chamber orbiting the trade hub of Loria Prime, representatives from 6 of the largest powers gathered. The room was a perfect sphere, its floor a translucent grid glowing faintly beneath their feet. They stood in a circle, their voices low, as if the void outside could hear them. "They're spreading," growled Tovarak, the towering, fur-covered warlord of the Kythal Dominion. His claws scraped the grid floor with each word. "First Earth, now systems across the outer rim. Their machines are everywhere, waking old caches like a virus. If we wait any longer, we won't have the strength to stop them." Stale, the eldest, voice in the room, his scales dull with age, shook his head slowly. "You think we can stop them?" Even when humans still lived, our combined fleets could not match their constructs. What we face now may not even require a living commander. These machines could destroy us without a single human waking. "They're only machines," interrupted Jera, the sleek, silver-eyed governor from the Interstellar Coalition. "Machines have weaknesses. We find them. We exploit them. We end this before the Deathworlders reclaim their territory." Her words echoed through the chamber, but few met her gaze. They had all seen the reports. Terran constructs didn't need conventional weapons. They didn't need to fight long battles. The Javari fleet hadn't been destroyed, but it had been humiliated, shut down like someone had flipped a switch. No one knew how it was done. A new voice spoke, calm and soft, from a figure standing near the shadows. It was Chiron, the archivist, invited reluctantly to advise the council. His thin frame looked frail next to the hulking warlords, but when he spoke, the room stilled. "If you attack first," Chiron said, his words deliberate, "you will not just lose. You will wake everything. These constructs will interpret your strike as a signal that humanity is under threat. And when that happens, the fleets you fear will not just awaken. They will assemble," Tovarak growled. "And if we do nothing, them rise unchecked until we're surrounded by Terran ghosts?" Chiron's dark eyes met his. "Then perhaps the humans themselves will wake first, and you can speak to a living commander, not a machine programmed only to kill." The council fell silent. None of them liked the thought, but none of them had a better plan. Far from their chamber, the desolate Orion verge, the first signs of what Chiron feared began to unfold. A forgotten star system. Its sun, a cold, flickering ember, erupted with activity. From behind shattered moons and debris clouds, dozens, then hundreds of black angular ships emerged. They were not crewed. No life signs pulsed within them. Their movements were precise, mathematical, as if controlled by a single mind. One by one, their hulls lit with faint, blue-white veins of energy. They aligned into formation, orbiting a central construct so massive it dwarfed battleships a floating fortress. Kilometers long, with a core that pulsed like a beating heart. It had no windows, no ports, no indication it had ever housed a crew. Inside, deep within its armored shell, ancient systems hummed awake. Holographic maps lit up, charting the positions of dormant Terran installations scattered across the galaxy. Some were ships, others were entire shipyards, hidden inside gas giants or buried beneath uncharted worlds. Lines of data scrolled as the network assessed threats, and then a voice. Not mechanical, not entirely human, but something between the two. The Overseer AI, the mind left behind to guard the fleet. Reclamation protocol active. Phase 1 complete. Phase 2, assembly and synchronization. Awaiting primary command authority. No human presence detected. Deferring to autonomous control. The AI paused. Its core flickered once, almost uncertain. Threat assessment. 72%. Probability of hostile contact from current galactic powers. Contingency. Defensive escalation authorized. The Black Fleet began to move, splitting into smaller groups, each jumping to different systems where more Terran relics slept. Every jump was silent and instant. No warp gates, no trails, nothing for anyone to track. Across the galaxy, scanners went wild as the constructs appeared without warning near forgotten worlds. Some retrieved dormant vessels. Others deployed. Structures orbital platforms, repair docks, factories that reactivated as if they had never been asleep. Within days, what had been a single ship on Earth had become the beginning of a fleet. On the industrial world of Zather, the panic finally turned to action. The Syndicate there, desperate to show strength, launched a preemptive strike. A fleet of 200 ships, equipped with the latest weaponry, warped to a system where Terran signals had been detected. Their target, a derelict shipyard recently. Reactivated and guarded by only a handful of Terran drones. It should have been easy. The Syndicate fleet exited warp in perfect formation, its weapons hot, eager to strike before reinforcements could arrive. The drones didn't move. They floated silently near the shipyard, their energy signatures faint, almost dormant. The Syndicate opened fire. Plasma lances, missile barrages, kinetic rounds all filled the void. The drones didn't evade. They didn't shield. Every round hit, and then every Syndicate ship went dark. Engines died. Shields dropped. Life support remained, but weapons and propulsion vanished, just like with the Javari fleet. Panic erupted on every bridge as crews scrambled to reboot their systems. None of it worked. The Terran drones finally moved. Not to fire, not to destroy, but to speak. A single transmission echoed through every Syndicate channel. In perfect unison, you have violated Terran reclamation space. You will leave. Next incursion will be met with eradication. The Syndicate ships were left adrift for hours before their systems flickered back to life, just enough for them to retreat. None of them ever returned to the Orion Verge. The message was clear to the rest of the galaxy. These machines were not conquering. Not yet. They were reclaiming something. They had no interest in negotiation, only in clearing and protecting their territory. But no one knew what or why. Meanwhile, in a cold chamber on a forgotten moon, the heartbeat inside the stasis pod grew stronger. The human was waking. The AI overseer detected the rising vitals and altered its priorities. The assembly of the fleet continued, but now resources were diverted. A command vessel was prepped. Systems once dormant for millennia roared to life, waiting for a living captain. For the first time in 20,000 years, a human voice would soon command the Terran fleet. And when that voice spoke, The galaxy would no longer fear just machines. It would fear the return of the Deathworlders themselves. The void was calm, but every military network across the spiral arm burned with tension. Reports of Terran constructs their black ships and untraceable jumps spread like wildfire. Entire governments debated behind closed doors, their fear. Leaking through, despite their careful lies, no one wanted war. No one wanted to provoke the machines, but war, as always, came anyway. In the deep reaches of the Orion Verge, the Terran fleet was growing. Their constructs had activated half a dozen dormant shipyards, each spitting out new vessels as if they had never been cold. Thousands of drones, automated factories, and carrier frames formed an ever-expanding shadow around a dead star. No signals of parley, no requests, no warnings beyond the cold. Repeating message, humanity returns, prepare. For some empires, that was enough reason to stay away. For others, it was a reason to strike. The Dravari Ascendancy, one of the most militarized states in the galaxy, could not sit idle. To them, every moment the Terran fleet grew was a moment closer to their own extinction. Their Grand Marshal, a towering reptilian clad in ornate armor, summoned his admirals and gave the order: destroy the constructs before they awaken more. A fleet of nearly 400 warships assembled near the verge. Heavy cruisers, knots. Carrier groups all state-of-the-art, armed with weapons meant to tear through planetary shields. The Dravari believed in overwhelming force, and this time, they would not make the mistakes of the Dravari or the Syndicate. Their plan was simple. Strike first. Strike hard. Annihilate the Terran presence before it could respond. The fleet emerged. From warp at the edge of the Dead Star system, immediately they saw the Terran fleet. Dozens of black vessels floated in perfect formation around the massive central fortress. No signals, no movement, just silence. For a moment, the Dravari commander hesitated. The constructs didn't react to their arrival, didn't scatter, didn't arm weapons. They just watched. The Grand Marshal's voice crackled over the command channels, hard and cold. Engage. No hesitation. The Dravari fleet advanced. Fighters poured from carriers like swarms of insects. Plasma cannons lit the void. Missiles streaked toward their targets. Every weapon in the fleet unleashed its fury on the silent black ships. The first salvo hit home. Explosions rippled across the void as Terran hulls were engulfed in fire, yet when the flames cleared, the black ships remained, their armor unmarred. The Dravari sensors registered no shield signatures, no reactive fields, no energy flares. It was as if their weapons had struck empty space. Then the Terran fleet moved, not in a rush, not chaotically, but with perfect, calculated precision. The smaller black ships broke formation, not to retreat, but to surround the Dravari armada. Their engines glowed with faint blue light, and lines of energy began to trace along their hulls like veins. There was no warning shot, no demand for surrender. The first Dravari dreadnought, the Kravos, simply vanished. One instant it was there, its bulk dominating the center of the formation. The next, a pulse of distorted light rippled through space, and the ship was gone. Not destroyed, not exploded, just gone, leaving behind a void of warped gravity that tore several smaller escorts apart. Panic rippled through the Dravari ranks. The fleet tried to scatter, but their drives flickered and died. Their weapons shut down mid-fire. Screens across multiple bridges filled with static before a calm, human-like voice spoke in unison across every channel. You were warned. You violated reclamation space. Defensive protocols engaged. The black ships struck, not with weapons, but with precision. Energy arcs invisible to the eye cut through the Dravari formations, disabling reactors and severing power systems with surgical accuracy. Entire wings of cruisers went dark, drifting helplessly. Carriers lost control of their fighters, which either spiraled out of control or were remotely seized and turned against their own fleets in less than 15 minutes. The Dravari fleet of nearly 400 ships was broken. Not a single Terran construct had been destroyed. Not a single shot from the Dravari had managed to damage the black vessels. Those still conscious on the bridge of the Dravari flagship watched in horror as the central Terran fortress turned its attention to them. The fortress moved for the first time, its massive core glowing brighter than. Without a sound, a massive holographic projection lit up in front of the flagship's bridge windows. It showed a human figure, not flesh and blood, but a pale, featureless silhouette. The voice that followed was cold, measured, and final. You will leave. This system is no longer yours. Next incursion will not be tolerated. The hologram vanished. One by one, the Dravari ships regained minimal power enough to limp away, engines sputtering. No one dared remain. The retreat was silent, broken. Only by the hum of damaged systems and the soft groans of their shattered hulls. News of the defeat spread faster than any government could contain it. The galaxy had seen before that Terrans were dangerous, but never like this. These weren't living soldiers, commanders, or fleets with ambitions. These were machines, cold, relentless, with no emotion, no diplomacy, no hesitation. But something else was happening that no one had yet realized, deep within the Terran central fortress. Far beneath layers of shifting armor and data streams, the stasis chamber finished its sequence. The heartbeat within the pod stabilized. Life support surged to full power. A pair of human eyes opened for the first time in 20,000 years. The AI overseer's calm voice filled the chamber. Captain Illyra Kane. Terran Defense Command. Awakening sequence complete. Fleet status. Partial assembly achieved. Threat index rising. Awaiting your orders. The woman inside the pod, gaunt from centuries of sleep but alive, took a long breath. Her voice was weak, but steady. Report. The AI began listing events, the signal, the awakening, the hostile encounters, the defensive actions. Illyra listened in silence, her expression unreadable. When the overseer finished, she sat up slowly, her pale hand gripping the edge of the pod. How many ships are active? 364 constructs. 8 shipyards operational. 11 additional stasis sites pending activation. And how many humans are awake? Only you, Captain. Illyra closed her eyes for a moment. The galaxy beyond these walls had changed, but the fear, the hostility, the tension in it was the same as it had always been. Her people had slept to escape a plague, to buy time to survive. Now she was awake, and the galaxy was already circling like predators. She stood, her legs unsteady but firming with each step. Then we finish waking them. All of them. And anyone who tries to stop us. She looked out the viewport at the growing fleet, her voice turning cold. We remind them why they feared us. Captain Illyra Kane stood in the cold chamber, her body trembling not from fear, but from the shock of existing again. Her breath fogged in the frigid air as she gripped the edge of the stasis pod, staring through the transparent viewport at the black silhouettes of Terran constructs gathering beyond 20,000 years. That was how long she had been asleep. The overseer AI had told her that much as soon as she woke. 2 full galactic cycles had come and gone, while she and her crew, her entire species, lay buried in silence. But the AI had told her something else. Something she hadn't spoken aloud yet. Not everyone woke up, of the millions who had entered stasis at the end of the Terran exodus. Fewer than 1,000 pods were still functional. The rest had failed. Some had been lost to time. Others had been deliberately shut down by systems following protocols Illyra didn't yet understand. Show me the archives, she said, her voice steadier now, though her throat ached from disuse. The overseer complied. The walls of the chamber dissolved into light, and around her bloomed a vast projection, a timeline of the galaxy, from the day the Terrans went silent to now. Empires rising and falling, wars fought, trillions dead, entire species vanishing. And all the while, the Terran network slept, scattered across the stars, maintaining only the faintest hum of life. Then she saw it. The reason they had gone to sleep, the last years of the Exodus, were a blur of red warning markers and encrypted logs. A pathogen. alien in origin, unstoppable by any known science at the time. Not a virus, not a bacteria, something worse, something intelligent. It didn't just kill, it adapted. Entire colonies had been consumed. It wasn't war that drove humanity into hiding. It was survival. But as Alira studied the data, her brow furrowed. The pathogen wasn't gone. It was still out there. Small traces, hidden deep in the logs, showed that the Terran systems had continued to monitor it even during their long sleep. It had evolved. It had changed. And worst of all, the AI estimated a 90% probability that it was no longer limited to biological hosts. Illyra turned slowly toward the Overseer's core, her pale eyes narrowing. "You woke me because of the signal, not because of the galaxy." "What is correct," the AI said, its calm voice echoing in the chamber. "The galactic powers are not the primary threat. The organism has resurfaced. Its signatures were detected on 3 frontier worlds during the last 2 cycles. Containment failed in all instances. Extinction-level projections are active." Lyra felt a cold knot tighten in her chest. The galaxy was afraid of the Terrans because of the old wars, because of the machines, because of humanity's reputation as Deathworlders. But they didn't know the truth. The Terran fleet wasn't assembling to conquer. It wasn't reclaiming space for empire. It was waking because something far worse than humans was coming, and the galaxy had no idea. Illyra straightened, forcing strength into her limbs. "How many stasis sites can be brought online in the next cycle?" 6, the Overseer replied. 937 human survivors in total? Partial crews for 4 capital ships. Okay. I will supplement as needed, and the pathogen. Where is it now? Outer sectors of the Orion Verge, dormant in some systems, spreading in others. Estimated spread rate exponential, if left unchecked. Galactic powers remain unaware. Illyra exhaled slowly. Her people hadn't slept for nothing. They hadn't built these machines just to scare the galaxy. They had built them because only humans in their ruthless methods could face something like this. No other species would dare use the tactics required to contain the organism. But there was another problem. She could already hear the chatter from the Overseer's taps on galactic networks. The other empires were panicking, arming themselves, preparing to attack. They didn't know about the pathogen. They only saw Terran fleets gathering and assumed the old nightmares were returning. If they struck first, if they forced her to turn the constructs on them, it would waste time she couldn't afford to lose. "Patch me through to their networks," she ordered. "I need to speak to them before they do something stupid." The Overseer hesitated. "Direct communication risks revealing our locations. They already know where we are. And if they force a war now, none of us will be alive when this is over. Connect me." Moments later, across dozens of encrypted channels, leaders and admirals across the spiral arm saw something they hadn't seen in millennia. A human face. Illyra Kane's image, pale and gaunt, but unmistakably alive, appeared on their displays. "This is Captain Illyra Kane of the Terran Defense Command," she began, her voice cold and firm. "We are not here to conquer. We are not here to wage war. But there is a threat coming that none of you can face. You fire on us, if you delay us, you will doom your own people." Most of them didn't believe her. Some thought it was a trick, a ruse to buy time while the Terrans rebuilt their forces. But a few those who had seen the old records, remembered whispers of the organism from before the fall, felt a chill of recognition. Illyra gave them no time to argue. "Stay out of our way. Do not enter reclamation space. If you interfere, we will respond with force. Not because we want a war, because we don't have time for one." The transmission ended. Far away, in the shadows of a dead planet, something stirred. A cluster of organic growths pulsing like diseased hearts writhed in the darkness. Metal and flesh fused together, forming shapes that mimicked ships and machines but twisted. Alive. The pathogen was already building its own fleet, and as Illyra stood on the command deck of her awakening flagship, she knew the truth. The galaxy would soon learn the hard way. The Terrans weren't the threat. They were the only thing standing between the galaxy and something far worse. The void between the stars was darker than usual in the verge. Not because the stars themselves had dimmed, but because something alive was moving through the emptiness, swallowing the light as it passed. It had no name in any galactic tongue. To the Terrans buried deep in encrypted archives, it had been called the Hollow Bloom, an organism that wasn't a single creature, but a network of evolving entities, organic, mechanical, and something in between. It consumed technology as easily as flesh, rewriting both into its growing hive. And now, after millennia of dormancy, it was spreading again. Captain Alira Kane stood on the bridge of the Vigilant Dawn, her newly awakened flagship, the Ships. Interior was stark and functional, its systems manned by a skeleton crew of surviving humans, their faces pale from centuries in stasis. The rest of the vessel's stations were handled by AI constructs. The quiet voices of the overseers, subroutines, whispering status updates across the bridge. In the distance, her growing fleet, hundreds of black Terran constructs, silent and precise, formed a protective perimeter around the star system. But beyond them, sensors had picked up something else. Distortion. Swarm. "They're here," Alira murmured, her fingers tightening around the armrest of her command chair. On the tactical display, the anomaly appeared first as a cluster of faint energy signatures, irregular and erratic, unlike any conventional fleet. Then the signals multiplied. Dozens, hundreds. Each one pulsed in a way that no ship ever should like a heartbeat. Her XO, gaunt man named Callan, frowned at the readings. "Are we sure it's the Bloom? Could be another fleet shadowing us, trying to force a confrontation." Alira shook her head. "Look at the signatures, the pulse intervals. That's not a fleet. That's a hive." Even as she spoke, the swarm emerged into real space. At first, the creatures, if they could even be called that, looked like ships. Angular, predatory, gliding through the void. But their hulls weren't metal. They pulsed with translucent, vein-like conduits, as though blood pumped through them. Their surfaces shifted, plates of living tissue forming into crude armor one moment and writhing tendrils the next. Some bristled with weapons scavenged from fallen vessels, fused seamlessly into their bodies. The Terran fleet shifted instantly into battle formation. Black constructs reorienting without a single wasted movement. There were no spoken orders. No hesitation. The Overseer had already begun coordinating their response before Alira spoke. "Range?" she asked. 70,000 clicks in closing, Callan replied. "They're not using warp or drives we can track. They're swimming through the void." Alira's jaw tightened. The last time humanity had faced the Bloom, it had nearly ended them. These creatures could adapt to weapons, absorb energy, and even replicate technology they consumed. Standard tactics wouldn't work. Only overwhelming. Surgical strikes could stop them before they grew too resilient. "Target the largest clusters first," she ordered. "Cut them apart before they merge. Use Nolances only. No plasma, no fusion rounds. They'll just feed." On it, the fleet obeyed. From the black Terran constructs, beams of invisible energy lanced through the void. These were not traditional weapons. No lances tore apart the molecular bonds of whatever they hit, unraveling matter at its core. They had been built specifically for this enemy, designed to destroy without giving it material to consume. The first volley cut through the leading edge of the swarm, disintegrating several of the twisted ships. But the rest didn't retreat. They surged forward, tendrils extending like spears, latching onto fragments of their dead and reabsorbing them. Growing thicker as they advanced, they're adapting, Callan warned. Their outer shells are already shifting density. Nolances are becoming less effective. Then switch to gravitic shearers, Alira said. Crush them before they can reorganize. The fleet shifted tactics, visible waves of gravitic. Force rippled outward, bending the void itself around the advancing swarm. Dozens of the Bloom's creatures were torn apart, their bodies imploding into clouds of shredded tissue and alloy. But the Bloom had grown cleverer since humanity's last war with it. The swarm split, breaking into hundreds of smaller entities that darted in different directions, some flanking, others diving toward the Terran ships in suicidal lunges. The void erupted with motion as the constructs opened fire, swatting the smaller organisms like insects. Then one of the bloom creatures reached a Terran drone ship. Its tendrils latched onto the hull, burrowing in like a parasite. The Overseer responded instantly, detonating the drone's reactor before the organism could consume it. The explosion shredded several of the swarm, but more kept coming. "Status of the rest of the galaxy?" Illyra asked sharply, her eyes never leaving the tactical display. Callan's fingers danced across his console. "They're watching. Major Power is monitoring the battle from a distance. No one's interfering yet, but they're broadcasting." "Some think we brought this thing here," Illyra cursed under her breath. The galaxy had no idea how close it was to extinction. And if the other species thought humanity had unleashed the bloom, they would see no reason to cooperate. They would turn their guns on Terrans just as readily as on the swarm. "Send a burst to every channel," she ordered. "Short and simple. This is why we woke. Stay out of our way or share the bloom's fate." The Overseer handled the transmission while Illyra's eyes narrowed on the display. The swarm was thinning under the relentless Terran barrage, but for every creature destroyed, fragments of biomass and alloy drifted away, writhing. "Searching for something to latch onto? They'll rebuild from debris if we don't sterilize the field," Callan warned. "I know," Illyra said. Her voice dropped, low and grim. "Prep the Star Lance." The Overseer hesitated for a fraction of a second. "Activation will destabilize the system's gravity. Collateral damage to nearby moons and debris fields will be extreme." "Do it," Illyra ordered. "We're not leaving pieces for it to grow back." The Vigilant Dawn's core began to hum, deep vibration resonating through the ship as a weapon older than most civilizations charged. Energy built in concentric rings along the flagship's spine. It's invisible to the eye, but enough to make every nearby sensor flare. When the lance fired, the void itself seemed to split. A column of focused stellar energy erupted outward, sweeping across the battlefield, every fragment of the bloom, every writhing organism. Every scrap of corrupted alloy was reduced to nothing, vaporized at the molecular level. The lance's path scoured the battlefield clean, leaving only silence and drifting dust. The system went still. The Terran fleet held formation, scanning for stragglers. There were none. On the bridge, Callan finally exhaled. "That's one hive. Down. How many more do you think are awake?" Lyra stared at the empty void, her expression hard. "The bloom doesn't wake one hive at a time. That was just a scout cluster. The rest will be following soon." She turned to the Overseer. "How long until the rest of our crews are online?"
"Oh,
3 cycles, the AI replied, "and more fleets from the galactic powers are mobilizing toward our space. They will not stay passive much longer." Illyra's hand tightened on the railing. Beside her, the galaxy still thought humanity was the threat. They didn't realize the bloom would devour them all, human and alien alike. And if the empires kept interfering, she might be forced to treat them the same as the swarm, just another obstacle to be erased. "Wake every captain you can," she ordered. "Now send this message to every empire, every world, every council." The voice was cold, final, and clear. "Help us fight, or stay out of our way. Because the bloom doesn't care who you are, it will consume you all the same." And in the far reaches of the galaxy, in a nebula thick with shadow, something vast stirred. An organism the size of a moon opened a dozen glowing eyes and began to move, its tendrils trailing for thousands of kilometers as it roused its spawn. The true swarm was coming. The void between the stars was darker than usual in the Verge. Not because the stars themselves had dimmed, but because something alive was moving through the emptiness, swallowing the light as it passed. It had no name in any galactic tongue. To the Terrans buried deep in encrypted archives, it had been called the Hollow Bloom, an organism that wasn't a single creature, but a network of evolving entities, organic, mechanical, and something in between. It consumed technology as easily as flesh, rewriting both into its growing hive. And now, after millennia of dormancy, it was spreading again. Captain Alira Kane stood on the bridge of the Vigilant Dawn, her newly awakened flagship, the ship's interior was stark and functional, its systems manned by a skeleton crew of surviving humans, their faces pale from centuries in stasis. The rest of the vessel's stations were handled by AI constructs. The quiet voices of the overseers, subroutines, whispering status updates across the bridge. In the distance, her growing fleet, hundreds of black Terran constructs, silent and precise, formed a protective perimeter around the star system. But beyond them, sensors had picked up something else. Distortion. Swarm. "They're here," Alira murmured, her fingers tightening around the armrest of her command chair. On the tactical display, the anomaly appeared first as a cluster of faint energy signatures, irregular and erratic, unlike any conventional fleet. Then the signals multiplied. Dozens, hundreds. Each one pulsed in a way that no ship ever should like a heartbeat. Her XO, gaunt man named Callan, frowned at the readings. "Are we sure it's the Bloom? Could be another fleet shadowing us, trying to force a confrontation." Alira shook her head. "Look at the signatures, the pulse intervals. That's not a fleet. That's a hive." Even as she spoke, the swarm emerged into real space. At first, the creatures, if they could even be called that, looked like ships. Angular, predatory, gliding through the void. But their hulls weren't metal. They pulsed with translucent, vein-like conduits, as though blood pumped through them. Their surfaces shifted, plates of living tissue forming into crude armor one moment and writhing tendrils the next. Some bristled with weapons scavenged from fallen vessels, fused seamlessly into their bodies. The Terran fleet shifted instantly into battle formation. Black constructs reorienting without a single wasted movement. There were no spoken orders. No hesitation. The Overseer had already begun coordinating their response before Alira spoke. "Range?" she asked. 70,000 clicks in closing, Callan replied. "They're not using warp or drives we can track. They're swimming through the void." Alira's jaw tightened. The last time humanity had faced the Bloom, it had nearly ended them. These creatures could adapt to weapons, absorb energy, and even replicate technology they consumed. Standard tactics wouldn't work. Only overwhelming. Surgical strikes could stop them before they grew to resilient. "Target the largest clusters first," she ordered. "Cut them apart before they merge. Use Nolances only. No plasma, no fusion rounds. They'll just feed." On it, the fleet obeyed. From the black Terran constructs, beams of invisible energy lanced through the void. These were not traditional weapons. No lances tore apart the molecular bonds of whatever they hit, unraveling matter at its core. They had been built specifically for this enemy, designed to destroy without giving it material to consume. The first volley cut through the leading edge of the swarm, disintegrating several of the twisted ships. But the rest didn't retreat. They surged forward, tendrils extending like spears, latching onto fragments of their dead and reabsorbing them. Growing thicker as they advanced, they're adapting, Callan warned. Their outer shells are already shifting density. Nolances are becoming less effective, then switch to gravitic shearers, Alira said. Crush them before they can reorganize. The fleet shifted tactics, visible waves of gravitic force rippled outward, bending the void itself around the advancing swarm. Dozens of the Bloom's creatures were torn apart, their bodies imploding into clouds of shredded tissue and alloy. But the Bloom had grown cleverer since humanity's last war with it. The swarm split, breaking into hundreds of smaller entities that darted in different directions, some flanking, others diving toward the Terran ships in suicidal lunges. The void erupted with motion as the constructs opened fire, swatting the smaller organisms like insects. Then one of the Bloom creatures reached a Terran drone ship. Its tendrils latched onto the hull, burrowing in like a parasite. The Overseer responded instantly, detonating the drone's reactor before the organism could consume it. The explosion shredded several of the swarm, but more kept coming. Status of the rest of the galaxy? Illyra asked sharply, her eyes never leaving the tactical display. Callan's fingers danced across his console. They're watching. Major Power is monitoring the battle from a distance. No one's interfering yet, but they're broadcasting. Some think we brought this thing here, Illyra cursed under her breath. The galaxy had no idea how close it was to extinction. And if the other species thought humanity had unleashed the bloom, they would see no reason to cooperate. They would turn their guns on Terrans just as readily as on the swarm. Send a burst to every channel, she ordered. Short and simple. This is why we woke. Stay out of our way, or share the bloom's fate. The Overseer handled the transmission while Illyra's eyes narrowed on the display. The swarm was thinning under the relentless Terran barrage, but for every creature destroyed, fragments of biomass and alloy drifted away, writhing. Searching for something to latch onto? They'll rebuild from debris if we don't sterilize the field, Callan warned. I know, Illyra said. Her voice dropped, low and grim. Prep the Star Lance. The Overseer hesitated for a fraction of a second. Activation will destabilize the system's gravity. Collateral damage to nearby moons and debris fields will be extreme. Do it, Illyra ordered. We're not leaving pieces for it to grow back. The Vigilant Dawn's core began to hum, deep vibration resonating through the ship as a weapon older than most civilizations charged. Energy built in concentric rings along the flagship's spine. It's invisible to the eye, but enough to make every nearby sensor flare. When the lance fired, the void itself seemed to split. A column of focused stellar energy erupted outward, sweeping across the battlefield, every fragment of the bloom, every writhing organism. Every scrap of corrupted alloy was reduced to nothing, vaporized at the molecular level. The lance's path scoured the battlefield clean, leaving only silence and drifting dust. The system went still. The Terran fleet held formation, scanning for stragglers. There were none. On the bridge, Callan finally exhaled. That's one hive. Down. How many more do you think are awake? Lyra stared at the empty void, her expression hard. The bloom doesn't wake one hive at a time. That was just a scout cluster. The rest will be following soon. She turned to the Overseer. How long until the rest of our crews are online? 3 cycles, the AI replied, and more fleets from the galactic powers are mobilizing toward our space. They will not stay passive much longer. Illyra's hand tightened on the railing. Beside her, the galaxy still thought humanity was the threat. They didn't realize the bloom would devour them all, human and alien alike. And if the empires kept interfering, she might be forced to treat them the same as the swarm, just another obstacle to be erased. Wake every captain you can, she ordered. Now send this message to every empire, every world, every council. The voice was cold, final, and clear. Help us fight, or stay out of our way. Because the bloom doesn't care who you are, it will consume you all the same. And in the far reaches of the galaxy, in a nebula thick with shadow, something vast stirred. An organism the size of a moon opened a dozen glowing eyes and began to move, its tendrils trailing for thousands of kilometers as it roused its spawn. The true swarm was coming.